Whether you're watching live or recorded, hello Formula One fans and welcome to Fans Forum, the show where we put you guys, the fans, in pole position, driving the conversation as we've had another bumper Formula One weekend in Japan this time around. And we want your opinions and thoughts on it in the chat box. So make sure that you get very much involved as per usual. And there was a few surprises, wasn't there, across the weekend, with the RB21 proving she is still very much a leading lady at the hands of Max Verstappen. But what did you guys out there think? Were you entertained across the weekend? Or perhaps a little bit more like Carlos Sainz, saying that Suzuka is the new Monaco with limited entertainment and overtaking opportunities? Whatever side of the camp you sit on, let us know in the chat box during the show as we get into all the hot topics across the Japanese weekend. And of course, I'll be doing it as well with my VIP co-host, who today is none other than one half of Mania on Boards, Maia. Maia, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here, my dear. Are you excited to be on the show?
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm excited to talk more about this weekend.
Brilliant stuff. I've got to start first and foremost. When I have a new guest on, I always like to ask and understand how their love affair with Formula One began. So let us know.
Mine's a bit complicated. I am one of the newer fans. So my partner, Manon, we run an account together, got into Formula One during the pandemic because we had nothing else to do, really. And
was that via Drive to Survive or more the races?
I think a bit of both. So her friends got into Drive to Survive and then sort of encouraged her to watch the racing, really. Manon's a video editor, so she's very into like the storytelling, and so she finds the way that Drive to Survive is edited like fascinating. She always says that seasons 1 to 3 are like incredible in terms of the way that they're edited, so she found all of that really cool. And then it was like on in the house basically, and and then like slowly everyone around us just started to get into it, and I realized like how technical it was, and that really interested me because I have a science background, so it kind of fitted. I don't like Drive to Survive because I think it's lying a lot of the time, and that's like, I hate that. But
I admit, Lando's come out recently, hasn't he, and said that the stories aren't quite too true, and we've seen some people pick the details out how they are. But I mean, like you said with Manon, that the storytelling element, that's what they're there to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do what they're meant to do, but it's not a documentary.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, it's great to have you on the show, as I said, Maia, anyway, and we're going to get into all the action from the Japanese Grand Prix. I've got to ask, how did you watch? Are you serious and a purist? Did you watch every session live, or is it a bit more of a catch up at my own leisure across the weekend?
I watched quali and the race live. I did not watch the practice sessions. That would have been ridiculous. They were in the middle of the night, so I did catch up on them, but quali I thought was very exciting, so we're happy to wake up to that. And the race, we got up, but it's not that bad. Like 6 a.m. is not that bad, I don't think.
Yeah, and people are sitting on two sides of the camp, it feels, at the moment, saying that the race was slightly underwhelming. But like you said, qualifying was very much worth getting up for, wasn't it? You had 7 of the 10 constructors represented across the top 10, and this is what we expected and we wanted for the final year of these regulations, with the whole grid converging and it being like a who's who, and a shock and a surprise pretty much every race weekend so far. That's what we really wanted. But I know you're a big Max Verstappen fan, aren't you? And Max truly delivered across this weekend, didn't he? So there's been a lot of talk around the RB21 and, of course, people driving alongside Max Verstappen. This time around, Yuki Tsunoda. But Max was in a league of his own, possibly across the whole grid. What did you make of his performance in Japan this weekend?
Yeah, it was very impressive. I think he was more surprised than he should have been. You know, like, of course he's going to do well. I think McLaren binned it a little bit. I think they should have done something a little bit different with the strategy because they had faster cars. And yeah, it's a shame that there wasn't ever really a battle once qualifying had happened. But I think the RB21 is not as bad as people think it is. I think that was a shaky start, but hopefully they figured out what that window is for that car. So yeah, I don't think it's that bad. But we'll see.
I mean, we got to remember they had a dominant first half of 2024, didn't they? And it just fell away in the second half of the season. And people talking about Max maybe not even being motivated, but he's very much shown that he still wants to prove that he is the best. Where do you put Max amongst the modern greats, shall we say? We're talking about your Lewis Hamiltons. Has Max got to be in and around that conversation now?
I think if he sticks around for long enough, he will be. But I think in terms of skill, you have to put them both up there for sure. And I think we'll know from next season, right? Because the cars are going to be in completely different order. We'll know. Surely the Red Bull won't be where it is. You know, he might have to really be pushing that car, and I think that will really show all of the drivers' skills.
Do you expect Max to still be in Red Bull colours next year? Because, of course, there are regular whispers around. I saw a controversial picture across the weekend with Christian Horner and Lando Norris's dad saying that it will get the rumour mill talking. Is Max still the guy to lead this team into the new regulations, do you think?
I think Red Bull will not let him go. And I don't see Max sticking around in F1 generally long enough to put himself in another team and have to deal with, you know, like getting used to all of the people and everything. I think he's very loyal to Red Bull. And if they lose Max, they have no one to replace him. So they will spend every penny they have keeping Max in that car, I'm sure.
Do you think it's going to come down to the performance in the new regs as well? If it's still, I guess we've got to see how this season pans out, but they've lost a lot of big personnel behind the scenes, haven't they? Red Bull. So we don't know what they're going to deliver as a foundation for the new set of regulations in 2026. And I guess if Max isn't given the tools, that could then play into whether he looks elsewhere. Where would you say as a particular suitor, perhaps for Max? We mentioned Drive to Survive already in the storytelling element. There was that wonderful balcony scene with the Wolves, wasn't there? Could he have a home at the Silver Arrows?
I don't think he would go to Mercedes, not after 2021. Imagine, like, I actually think that Max will retire than go to a different team. I think, like,
so you think he'll just leave the sport completely?
Yeah, I think some things that he says, you know, he's always talking about how happy he is in his life outside of Formula One and how he wants to do other things. He wants to like develop his sim team, do some rallying, do some endurance. I think if the Red Bull is not good in 2026, I think he'll be like, yeah, I'm good. I'll go and do something else.
So let's talk about the performance of the current Red Bull. We know that Max Verstappen can drive pretty much anything out there, but in the second seat in that team, there is a struggle. You talked earlier about the performance window of the car. What's been your opinion on it? Because I know that you do some work yourself within STEM and engineering. So can you give us any kind of perspective from a more sophisticated angle? What's going on with that car?
I can try. So the Red Bull has always been quite a difficult one to drive. This isn't new. They've been developing it in the same way for a couple of years, in that it's very grippy and difficult to drive. And if you move the wheel slightly, the car's gone. And so I think it's a car that it's very easy to feel out of control in. And I think that's kind of what we see, that, you know, if they don't feel like the tires are at the right temperature, they don't feel confident in the car and they can't pull the laps out that they want to. We also saw in the first couple of races that there was a lot of tire drag. So, but I did see there was something very weird at the end of the last Grand Prix where Max really sped up towards the end of the race. And it seemed like he'd got the tires in the right window. And I was wondering whether that would translate to him being more comfortable in Japan. And it did. So, yeah, it seems like it's a difficult car to drive, but maybe he's figuring it out. But yeah, whether Yuki can figure out as well is another is another thing altogether. For sure.
Yeah, well, there's two parts to that answer there. So first up, the rest of the grid should be worried if, let's say, Max has found his purple window with that machinery.
Yeah.
But the other side of the garage there, Yuki Tsunoda, what did you make of his performance across the weekend, which started quite positively with FP1? How did what did you make of it? He finished P12, didn't he, in the end? Yeah, P12, Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah, so obviously in FP1 it looked like he was on par to Max and everything was looking good. I think maybe obviously FP2 we don't know what happened because of the fires, so anything. But in FP3 he was a bit behind, but not as much as it looked like it was in quali. And I think so whether it was the red flag in Q2 that sort of like stopped the track evolution or something, and he went very early after the red flag in Q2, which I was surprised by. I was like, seems like a risk, but okay. And it was a risk and it didn't pay off. But they also put him on a different setup to make the car easier to drive, which I don't know. I guess maybe they just wanted him to have a clean weekend, or they thought maybe this would fit his driving style, or maybe that's the feedback he'd given them. But I think there was an interview with Christian Horner where Christian said he should have been in Q3 and all of his pace was looking like it was. And Christian didn't seem annoyed at him. So, I think he qualifying, that's what everyone said. Qualifying won the race or lost the race. And that's what happened to Yuki. But he gained positions during the race and he held positions, which would not, somehow Isaac managed to hold in a V-carb, but generally the V-carbs do not hold position. They will go lower. So at least Yuki and the Rebel was able to stay in the same place.
What did you make? You mentioned qualifying and what he should have done, but it was quite evident during the session that he was carrying more rear wing. What did you make of that decision? Because I know the broadcast team were somewhat critical about it. Were you surprised by that decision? Is it a driver style thing rather than perhaps looking at just mirroring Max?
Yeah, I don't know whether maybe they changed the setup, before qualifying because of what he'd said about how the car felt. We don't know what happened. I think it's a shame that he wasn't necessarily able to have the same car. Obviously, it's the same car, but the same setup as Max, and to see what he could do alongside him. But equally, you don't want him crashing. You don't want him destroying it. So, I think it's weird that they did that, because if it was to improve the drivability, then why didn't they do that with Liam? That seems strange, but maybe it was a track specific thing. And maybe they were really banking on rain and they thought they did something very, very smart there. But I think it was a bit confusing, but it must have been based on driver feedback, because
the reason we love this sport, because there are so many variables, right?
Yeah.
And well, one of the talking points from the start of the race was that Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson were going to be alongside each other. So we talk about the storytelling element there. And Yuki did get beyond him immediately, didn't he? So that would have been great for Yuki's confidence. But there is this idea about the V-carb being almost as good now as the RB. What do you make of that? I mean, I saw some jokes as well online that they said that they've even made to try and make it look like it with the special Honda livery. Are we in a place where...
so confusing.
Yeah, I know, because you were looking in the background for the white car. Haas abandoned some of their white for a little bit of pink. And you're like, hang on, what one is... Oh, hang on, that's Max Verstappen.
It was so hard to see what was going on.
So is it that Racing Bull's V-carb are catching RB for you, or is it RB are falling back towards them?
I think that the Red Bull has the potential to be much, much better than the V-carb, but they haven't figured out how to get the potential out of the car yet. And I mean, they did this weekend, so Max won, so it's much better than the V-carb. And I think that if this was a race where there was overtaking opportunities, Isaac would have got overtaken a lot. my thing with VCARB is that their strategies are often really confusing, which is one of the reasons I'm glad Yuki is not there anymore. But yeah, no, I guess the Rebel was already so good. How much further was it likely to go? And it's great to see that the VCARB looks fast. I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing for the midfield battle. I don't think they're going to be fighting for podiums. Whereas I think, yeah, the Rebel should be every week.
And for you, Yuki Tsunoda, how does the season pan out for him in the second seat at Red Bull? Your opinion?
So I'm one of the people who thought Yuki should have had the seat in the first place. So it's sad that he didn't get to do testing and have those extra races and things. It feels like he's on the back foot now. But I think he needed to have the opportunity. You know, he deserves to have it. And if it goes very wrong, I think the rest of the teams on the grid know that that car is a bit of a problem. So hopefully it won't affect his market value and won't affect his ability to go off and, you know, go to another good team. But he needed to get out of that VCARB seat. Like, he can't be in that seat forever. And yeah, he deserves it. But I think, you know, he showed promise this. You know, he showed he knew how to drive it. He wasn't making huge mistakes, which is a good start, that he's vaguely confident. And we'll just have to see on a track where there is overtaking possibilities, whether he can do it. I was trying to think of like whether Max would have been able to make it up the field. But if Lando couldn't overtake Max, then no one was doing overtakes on that track. Like, so, yeah, I don't think it was a very good one for Yuki to start with.
Well, listen, we could keep delving on the Red Bull situation, but let's push it forwards and talk about the Papaya boys, McLaren, who seem to sit somewhat comfortably behind Max Verstappen for the duration of the race. Maia, you mentioned it right at the top of the show that you were a bit disappointed with their strategy. Jack Villeneuve on the broadcast was also willing them to be a little bit more gung-ho. What did you make of it? Why do you think they chose to sit behind Max and, you know, try and watch or wait for one of the best in modern times to make a mistake rather than push for it themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame because I think McLaren really relied on the fact that they had more pace than Red Bull when they didn't really, like, in reality. And maybe it was because they didn't manage to do long runs because there was no FP2. Maybe they didn't have the data on that and they didn't know that Max was actually so fast. But there's been a lot of talk around. So Lando was much quicker at the beginning and then Oscar was much quicker. Whether they should have swapped Lando and Oscar and let Oscar have a go at Max. I don't think they should have, because I don't think Oscar would have been able to get Max, which we know because of, you know, how the race ended. Yeah, I think it was a shame that they couldn't really do anything else. They did kind of try and pit Oscar early to see if they could get the undercut, but it didn't happen. So yeah, it was a shame, but it was just quite boring at the front.
Gary makes the point here to say that they played it safe for second and third positions, and P2 means that Lando stays top of the driver's standings for the moment, of course. And possibly they're thinking back to when they got bit in the backside in Italy last year, where they didn't sit in formation and ended up losing out to Charles Leclerc, which as a team, brilliant. And of course, they won the Constructors last year. Is this kind of mentality, though, the kind of mentality for you that's going to bring home a drivers' championship?
I think it makes it risky. I think they need to. It's very difficult because they don't have a first driver, and I think whilst Lando was if we look at the points right now, Lando has quite a few more points than Oscar because Oscar made that mistake in Australia. But they're very evenly matched, you know, like they've got one win each. It's very difficult for McLaren. And I think they're probably playing by if you qualify high, you get priority at the moment, which if they do that, if they have one qualifying higher each week, then who's getting priority? What's going on? So I think...
What would you do as team principal? So let's say the beginning of the season, would you have done as Zach Brown has and Andrea Stella and said, right, you can race, but
Yeah.
safely and fairly. Would you have done that from the offset, or would you have favoured a driver?
I think I wouldn't have favored a driver at this point, but I think they're very indecisive with their decisions in race to the point where it means that, you know, it's taken. So like when I can't remember which race this was, but there's only been 3 races. But anyway, one of the 2 races, not Japan. Oscar was told to hold position while they cleared the blue flags because there were lapping people, and then it took them 5 laps to say you can race again. And what you know, like that can't be happening. They need to, you know, be more decisive about their decisions, and I think that that's the only way they can get a true measure of like who's better really between the 2 of them. I think it's difficult because I get the feeling that they would always favor Lando because he's been around for longer, and you know, I think financially he kind of has more of a stake in the team. But
well, until recently, because Oscar's re-signed, hasn't he? A big boy contract, I think now.
Yeah.
And we know the value of Oscar Piastri on the grid. For you, is there an element of it that's, I don't know, marketability, could we say? Because the headline act at the moment in the world of Formula One is Max versus Lando, isn't it? And I'm sure that Oscar is sitting there quietly confident that he can be involved with it. But if we're thinking about from a commercial perspective, Lando is very much the poster boy. I know that we have an Anglo-centric perspective because we're in the UK, but there's a lot of that going on, and maybe it's different in Australia.
Yeah, I do. I actually think it's different in other parts of the world. So Manon's French, so she hears what her French friends are seeing on social media and things like that.
Right.
And Lando is not the poster boy in the rest of the world. I think it's just like the British media.
She's. I think is that Manon picking you up there? So there you go. Always supporting.
So rude.
Lovely. I love it. The other half of your collective there, tuned into the show and just putting you right. This is why we have a team, though. See, because we both you've got different strengths.
Yeah, no, she remembers everything. That's definitely her thing.
So Oscar Piastri, only in his 3rd season in F1. Could you see him as a potential drivers' champion? What have you made of Oscar's evolution within Formula One?
I love Oscar. I think he has such an amazing mentality. And I think what Lando can't bring, Oscar can, in terms of not bidding it when it's important. Sorry, Lando. But I think, you know, I'm always a bit stressed for Lando when he's like, you know, in P1 or leading a race, you know, like that at any point something could happen, or I don't feel like that with Oscar. It feels like he's got it. And that he will make decisive choices, which I think is, you know, what gets you a world championship. But yeah, I don't know how McLaren is going to get a world drivers championship if Max is decent and they don't know who their number 1 driver is.
And you don't think that Lando's put that ghost to bed that you've just mentioned there? And did you not show us at the weekend, even that little incident in the pit lane, that he wasn't going to give way to Max perhaps as he used to?
I think that was there's not giving way, and there's literally driving through the grass. Like, Lando, what are you doing? I think actually what was more likely to happen is that the McLaren were going to get an unsafe release penalty for that. I think that was a really bad judgment. But yeah, I know he's probably trying to show that with that, and we'll see if we'll see when he's in tricky situations and him and Max are properly fighting how that works out. But yeah, I don't know. I think Oscar's more likely to be a world champion than Lando is, but I think that's probably a controversial opinion, to be honest.
I mean, I think there's a lot of opinions out there now in the stratosphere that there's, like we just said, possibly outside of the UK, it might be leaning the other way. But it's interesting to see how that papaya relationship is going to pan out across the duration of the season, because at the moment, there's a bit of pressure of leading a race, but there isn't huge stakes, there at the moment. But once you get beyond the summer break, when we're starting to see how the grid is forming a little, then all of a sudden the pressure mounts, because it's okay, I'm in with a chance of winning the title here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens across the rest of the season. Let's turn our attention now to Ferrari. So first up, Charles Leclerc finishing in P4, celebrating his 150th Grand Prix as well. So before we get into Ferrari's overall performance, Maia, just Charles Leclerc, 150 Grand Prix deep now. Would we have expected him to have mounted a better title challenge, particularly if we look at how 2022 started for him?
I mean, yeah, it's a shame that it hasn't happened, really. It feels like it, sometimes he has a good start and then it kind of fizzles out, or that, oh my God, Manon's being funny.
I know, I'm loving it. That's what I've got an option of what ones I put up, and I've seen it, the streets. So she's letting us know what's going down on the street. I like it.
The streets are her opinion. Yeah, so I think
Charles Leclerc, should he have been in and amongst it since 2022?
I'm going to hide that so I can't see her comments. I think it's a shame. I think, there's been a lot of strategy nonsense in his team and kind of meant that he hasn't been able to consistently fight up there. It's just been inconsistent, and that's a massive shame. And yeah, this season he hasn't really shown the car is not there, right? So it doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year either for him, unless something like dramatically changes, which it could. But it looks like the Ferraris are kind of hanging out there with the Mercedes, and it's a bit of a shame.
How do you feel about his motivation, perhaps, Charles Leclerc? Because, like you said, things from outside of his control. But then last year, those great performances in both Monaco and at Monza, what kind of headspace do you think he's in?
I think he probably knows that he can do it, for sure. I don't think it ever seems like his confidence gets knocked, which I think is really impressive from him. But I think it must be quite hard when you're like a world-class driver and the car is inconsistent, or, there's issues all the time, and it must be frustrating. But he seems very upbeat. He seems kind of happy where he is. So they must know something positive is happening, hopefully.
Do you think a part of it as well could be the fact that Lewis Hamilton comes in and obviously the spotlight is on the team now, and it feels like even just 3 races in, a lot of the spotlight is exposing perhaps processes within that organization that need to be improved and efficiencies that need to happen if they are going to be challenging at the front. And Charles almost can sit back and go, see?
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think with Lewis being there and him having so much, not control, but influence in the F1 world, if changes need to be made, like his team can make them happen. Like that's something that Charles probably doesn't have the influence and power to do, but have somebody like Lewis coming in is, I think, we could only be a good thing for Charles. I think people were kind of worried that he would be intimidated by Lewis coming in, but that doesn't seem to have happened at all.
Yeah, we talked to some of the earlier shows and said it might have actually been somewhat refreshing for him, because it's the first time that he isn't clearly a number one driver with all the focus being on him. So he could probably have an off season where he can get into training, maybe not being asked for as many media appearances as per usual, and really focus himself. So there's always a silver lining to some extent if you want to see the fact that a 7-time world champion coming in is a bit of a cloud to your team.
Yeah, no, I've been impressed by his attitude to that. It doesn't seem to have affected him at all.
And Lewis Hamilton across the weekend, he actually, the only thing that he did do was ruin the qualifying 1 to 10, ending as the race 1 to 10. And I'm pretty sure that must have never happened in Formula One. So Lewis, it isn't a criticism, but that would have been pretty fun if that had happened. Yeah,
it would have been fun, but sadly not. He didn't really do anything, did he? He was just on his own during the race.
The quote from Lewis that I saw post-race, though, is saying that they have found something. I don't know if you saw that. And he's saying whatever element it is on the car, he's losing about a 1/10 of a second a lap. And they've identified it now. So again, it's this idea that you've got the best of the best sifting through your organization. It's almost like they paid for a consultant to come in and oversee from top to bottom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's good that they know what's wrong. Whether they can fix it, we'll see.
What did
It
you
might go on.
What did you make of the alternative tyre strategy? Even that, it's at least they tried a little something out of the ordinary with him.
Yeah, they did. They tried. I mean, nothing seemed to make a difference during this race. Like, they seemed to change, like, any strategy. Like, people were on the softs. It was fine. You know, it was like, nothing seemed to change anything. I think they were saying that with they've resurfaced it and it's too smooth. And so the hard was faster than the medium, and it was just a bit of a mess. So
yeah, apart from Lance Stroll, I mean, we'll touch on Aston Martin in a minute, but who drove around at the back of the race on his own because he had soft tyres that was it 9 laps? I think for some reason.
I know when they were they were banking on a safety car, weren't they?
Yeah. So he must have just eaten those tyres away really quickly, hoping for something, and it just didn't happen. And every time you looked at the standings, he was a good 20 seconds off of everybody, which is a bit of a shame because he hasn't started too badly. Yeah, particularly compared to his teammate. But we'll get into Aston Martin in a little while. But let's move it forwards and take a look at the Silver Arrows, who I've been quietly impressed with their start to the season. And of course, we always say losing Lewis Hamilton is a huge void to fill. George Russell seems to have stepped up into that role nicely. And the young Kimi Antonelli is dealing well with the pressure on his shoulders. What have you made of the pair of them? So let's start with George as the leader of the organisation now.
Yeah, I've been very impressed. He's been doing super well. He's the driver who, if Red Bull or McLaren have issues, he's going to pick up a win here and there this season. You know, he's waiting for some sort of incident at all times. I'm impressed with where he's been and where their pace is. They're still they're nowhere near the McLarens and the Red Bulls really pace wise in the race, but you know, he's doing a good job. He's qualifying consistently, so hopefully he can keep that up and they can find a bit more pace because I like George. He's fun.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting lawnmower and hedge cutter advert with him on Instagram today, and he's in some huge mansion. And I think leading the team now, we might get to see a bit more of a fun side of George and the real character, because there's a little less stress on him because he's being compared to one of the all-time greats and trying to close that gap. Now he knows he's got an organisation very much behind him. I think we'll see a more settled and more relaxed George Russell. And he's Gary's saying, business-like again from both their drivers this weekend. And alongside him, of course, Kimi Antonelli, the young rookie, did very well again. Led the race for the first time, Grand Prix after the pit. So that's a nice little thing for him. And he got the fastest lap. Albeit we don't get an extra point for that nowadays.
It still counts as a record. He impressed me so much during that race. Like, he was pushing, he was very close to George. He was, you know, you can really tell from where they finished that race that Kimi was a rookie. You know, you couldn't tell that he was the number 2 driver because he was so close to George. And that's really impressive from his third race. It shows that he was prepared properly and that he's very talented. Like, it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do.
Yeah, he's been really consistent, isn't he? And we know that Mercedes spent a lot of time with him in previous cars, getting him ready for this season. There was, of course, the moment at Monza where he shunted the car, and even like coming back and dealing with that in the way that he has, to now be so consistent, and it feels like almost continuously delivering just behind his teammate, which is exactly what you'd want from him, wouldn't you?
Exactly. Yeah, he's been very impressive, and he seems very level-headed, and just, you know, he knows what he's doing. Nothing's getting to him about him being an F1. So yeah, very impressed.
Real quick, actually, just before we move it forwards off of the Mercedes team, George Russell, I believe his contract is up. Is it the end of 2026 or is it but I
don't know off the top of my head.
Do you feel that the future for the team is more Kimi than George, or do you think George is still very much there, or does it depend on the Verstappen situation or possibly even the Norris situation? Do you think Mercedes still have that kind of draw on the grid if they're not performing?
I mean, I think they are performing, not to the level that, I don't know why you would move from McLaren, for example, to Mercedes at this point, but the regulations are changing. We don't know what the cars look like for next year. But I mean, I think it seems like they're holding on and waiting to sign that contract. But then again, there was a quote from George saying, I don't feel like I'm under any pressure and there's no pressure to sign immediately. So maybe he's like negotiating or something. Maybe it's just about money. We don't know. So there was so much not movement, but so many new drivers this year. I feel like that can't happen again. It can't be that insane. But yeah, we'll see. I think George is pretty stable at that team. I think he's doing a good job. They can't be, annoyed with what he's doing, really.
Comment from Gary just saying that he thinks Kimi will be Rookie of the Year. And we've said how consistent he's been so far this season. But I want to use that comment from Gary to segue into the next team, which is the Racing Bulls V-Carb, and the man that you can see there who's in focus rather than the one who isn't. But Isaac Hadjar.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it out there. Is he slowly becoming everyone's favourite rookie thus far, particularly if we talk about the journey he's been on from race 1 to race 3 already? Yeah. What have you made of it?
I think he's great. Like, he's a great personality. I think his attitude is very good, that he seems to, be, not that he's not serious, but he doesn't like give me stress to watch, even when bad things happen. And we watched F2 quite closely last season, and he was just consistently up there. And when, I don't know if he's necessarily got the car to show his potential, but he, he's a very aggressive driver. He's going to hopefully be able to bring us some very exciting racing. So I've been very impressed with him. And this weekend was insane. Like, the fact that he managed to stay up there was so impressive. And you know what, getting overtaken by Lewis is fine. Like, I would be like, he probably enjoyed that. Like,
I think he said he's his hero as well. So to be in and around it and maybe paying him a little bit too much respect, who knows? But it must be a real pinch yourself moment that the person that used to be the poster on your wall is now in the car alongside you. But Maia, it's really great to hear actually that you followed F2 last year, because we know that Isaac Hadjar was in the running to win the championship right until the death. Give us a little bit more of an insight into his performance in F2 last year then, because from what I understand, he was leading the championship at the midway point. It was the second half of the season where he lacked a bit of consistency. And I know as well that historically he hasn't won any championships in the junior series, yet he's made it all the way to Formula One. So tell us a bit about his talents that you saw last year.
Yeah, so his lack of consistency was not all down to him. It was, F2 is insane, right? Like, he lost the championship because his car stalled. Like, it was nothing to do with him. So he could have won for sure the championship. It really did come down to the wire. And I think he outdrove his car for sure last year, which we're already seeing he's doing with that V-Carb, which is very cool. I think in F2, he was kind of known for being very hot-headed and aggressive, and not like aggressive in a good way. I think his driving is aggressive in a good way, and that he'll just go for gaps and things like that. I don't know if you can do that in a Formula One car at the moment because of how difficult it is for them to pass each other, but he did it in F2 for sure. And but yeah, he seems like much calmer now. He seems like he's like got respect for where he is, and he's just like in awe of what he's doing. But yeah, no, he was impressive. And he's not being consistent, right? In the first 3 races. So
in qualifying, he has, right? Q3 in every race so far?
I don't know.
Has he? I'm pretty sure he was definitely Q3 last up. And then in the first race, that's what they were excited about, weren't they? And then he put the car in the barrier. But he's definitely qualified well at the beginning of this season. But he was
11th. He was 11th in his first race. Fair enough.
Oh, okay, there we go. So almost.
That's amazing still. Yeah.
Yeah. The lovely clip that I saw of Isaac Hadjar was, we know what fans, journalists, etc. are like, very fickle and knee-jerk. And they said, well, if the call comes from Red Bull, and he said, I'll be ready In fact, even if I'm not ready, I'll say
Yeah.
I'm ready, which
Yeah.
buys into that lovely character of humility that you just talked about.
Yeah.
So I guess it shows that he's transitioning and maturing really well within
Yeah.
this step up.
Yeah, he's been different, very different to how I expected him to be. But he did say that the only reason he was like that on the radio in F2 is because he'd been working with that race engineer for so long that it was fine. And he knew he couldn't come into F1 like being all aggressive on the, like he used to like scream on the radio. It was like he was trying to talk to his engineer from the car, like without a radio. It was so loud. And he's not like that at all now. So yeah, he seems to know where he is and kind of like know that he's a rookie and he's still learning and being very humble, as you said. And I think that's nice to see. I mean, Kimmy's doing it as well. Actually, almost all the rookies are. So they're behaving nicely, which I think is important when you're new.
And alongside him, Liam Lawson, now in the Racing Bulls car.
Yeah.
Where does he go from here? Well, how does the rest of his season look? And the way I talked about this last week, I said we talked about, Christian Horner making noises that there's also a responsibility for his mental well-being and whether the spotlight is actually good for him with the pressure that's happening. So for you, where does the young man sit now with this, what is a demotion?
Yeah, I think if you're Liam, you've got to be thinking about, can I ever get that Red Bull seat back again? And if not, he has, knowing that you really have to show your talent in a V carb, I think is difficult.
Pierre Gasly did it though, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It is completely doable. Yeah, exactly. So let's see how he does. Honestly, I think this weekend was another it wasn't great this weekend.
Would you say it was the right decision now? I know you've already said that you didn't agree with the decision for the second seat initially and thought Yuki should have got it. But do you think Lawson should have been given longer than 2 races?
Okay, I don't think I can be objective about that.
Because give us an insight to that then. Why can't you be objective?
I just really don't like Liam. I don't like his attitude.
Is that almost down to a bit of Drive to Survive editing though?
No, it's down to what he says.
Okay,
I just think he really acted like he was like, yeah, I've really deserved this seat, I've done so much to get this seat. And I don't think that's necessarily his fault. I think that's what he'd been told by Red Bull, and then to be that bad, it's like, oh, that's like, that can't happen. And I think, Red Bull prepared him badly. They need to stop seeing somebody be okay in the V carb and think they'll be okay in the Red Bull, because they're completely different cars. It's very strange. But yeah, no, I just think he's not made himself very likable. And I'm ready for him to redeem himself in the V carb. But yeah, it's a shame that he's still really, I guess it's, he hasn't driven this car yet. So we'll see how he does. But they needed to do something if they didn't see. And I think probably from what I think, the reason that they swapped them is because the car is not where it needs to be. And they needed somebody who was a bit more experienced to help bring the car up. I think it wasn't necessarily that they're not investing in Liam anymore. So I think it's just that, Yuki's driven an F1 car for longer, so they needed him. I think it's kind of what happened.
I think what's been useful for the organisation as a whole, though, and for their junior programme, perhaps, is the performance of Isaac Hadjar. Because let's say if Isaac was struggling this year, and then you've got a guy now alongside him who's been demoted from the senior team, I guess there'd be a lot of eyes on who's coming through and who's going to break this kind of negative spiral that's happening. So they have still got Isaac Hadjar that flying the flag for the younger drivers coming through the organisation.
Yeah, it's a real big... I think Red Bull's been prioritising money over sporting decisions for a couple of years, and it shows because they've got Max, who could leave at any moment. Let's be real. We've got Yuki, who they don't want in that seat because they didn't pick him. And they've got Isaac, who is amazing, but is not ready to be in the Red Bull. And Liam, who they tried and didn't work. And then the next one is like somebody who's just gone into F2. So their pipeline is a bit of a mess at the moment. And if they haven't got an amazing car next season and they can't attract new drivers in, I don't know what their plan is, honestly. I don't.
Get the checkbook out, I think, and start trying to tout some drivers from other teams, perhaps.
Yeah, they're going to have to.
Yeah, a team that has got the checkbook out and touted drivers from other teams is Williams, who one of the big signings and stories of last season was Carlos Sainz making the decision to go there, Maia. But at the moment, it's his teammate Alex Albon, who is like a bat out of hell. This is exactly what Alex has needed, right? Just a little bit of a rocket up him, and it's just points, points, points. Talk to me about Alex Albon, Maia, in 2025.
Yeah, I'm so happy for him. He's doing an amazing job. I don't think anyone is upset when Alex does well. Like, we all want him to do well. And I think everyone kind of wants Williams to get a bit of a boost in them, like get some of that performance back that they had all those years ago. So I think it's positive for Williams. I think it's a shame that they're starting to perform at the end of a regulations. Like, what's going to happen next year? But I think having somebody to challenge him in that second seat has definitely been important. Not just challenge, but help develop the car. You know, like Carlos helped with the strategy. Like, that's incredible. You know, it's nice to that I guess maybe Alex feels like he has somebody who's on his level finally.
Well, it's that idea again of almost having someone from another organization as a consultant across all areas and processes and saying, oh, well, look, this is what we did at Ferrari. This is what we did at McLaren. And you had Alex, who he was at Red Bull, but it was such a short little stint that he probably would have just been learning. So wouldn't really completely know and understand the success of that team. Whereas Carlos was at Ferrari, is it 4 seasons, 5 seasons? So but for a serious stint within that organization, so we'll be able to bring that knowledge into Williams to help improve them. And of course, James Vowles coming in from decades at Mercedes. So even with the new regs coming, I think there's so much that's been underpinned and put in place now that they should be positive about the future. And even just the stat that I saw about Alex Albon, he's only been beaten in qualifying twice out of 47 occasions from teammates. And don't get me wrong, like, his teammates possibly haven't been quite up to his standard in the last couple of seasons, but for the moment, he is maintaining that alongside Carlos Sainz. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I guess, you know, having somebody we can compare Alex with who is up to standard will show us that Alex is really good. And how much patience do we need with Carlos Sainz? So at the moment, everybody is, as I said, he was the poster boy for as the big signing coming in. When can we expect to see him begin to shine on a par maybe with Alex? I think he's already okay in that car. I think he's not massively disappointing. But I think a couple more races and he'll be up there, really. And James Vowles did a video after the race and he said, you know, we messed up, we pit him at the wrong time and then he was in traffic. And so, I think it's qualifying pace really that he needs to get, and that's confidence in the car. So it's good that he gets some grace of a couple of races. I guess maybe if, you know, after the triple header, he's still a bit behind Alex, then we might be able to question what's going on there. But I don't think that's going to happen. Carlos is a very good driver, so it should be okay. Yeah, Gary, a regular contributor to the show, I should just call him now, rather than just a fan, saying that when Carlos gets used to the car, we'll see him moving up the standings. And our guest last week made a really nice point that whatever team Carlos has gone into, that team has improved. And not only the team, the dynamic with the teammates. He creates a real good relationship with all of his teammates. So maybe that's what Alex Albon is already benefiting from all this social media fun and content that we get to see. Yeah, and that teamwork is so important to improving the car. That's a very good point. I think it's very important. Well, you know yourself as well. You're in a pairing of content creators, so look out for that. Even if your pairing is in the chat box. I don't think. I'm sure she won't continue to distract me. No, I was very much enjoying the contributions. Let's turn our attention to Haas, who had another successful weekend in I'm going to call it somewhat of their home Grand Prix, as they have a Japanese team principal in Ao Komatsu.
Yeah.
And even the lovely little touch of the spring blossoming pink that they had across their side pods for the weekend as well. And young Ollie Behrman back in the points.
Yeah.
And we were really, not we as in me and you, but a lot of people were worried about Haas after testing. But I saw something from Komatsu that said Australia was a shambles, but we gathered up, collected, figured out why it was such a shambles. And then they got double points last time out in China. And then Behrman picking up P10 in Japan this Grand Prix. What have you made of them?
Yeah, we love Haas. We think they're great. And I think the progression has been so quick for them. And they've kind of seen that over, we kind of saw that last season. You know, we've seen that they progressed their car very well. And so hopefully that can continue over the course of the season and they can keep really like pushing in the midfield. Because they seem to be capable. That car seems to be okay. And they've got two drivers that are capable. So we'll have to see how that goes. I don't know what happened to Esteban this week. I can't remember. Why did he end up?
Not much. The highlight that stood out for me was that he very calmly let Oliver Behrman through. So I was like, wow. Yeah. We've got an Esteban Ocon that has changed for the better. I'm few and far between where Esteban, you haven't heard him on the radio disagreeing with team orders.
Yeah,
and letting the young rookie through. Maybe again, it could be a mature role that he might be enjoying growing into, Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, for sure. We think Esteban gets way too much hate. He's a very nice man. We like him.
Yeah, I always see it says that he's got like that Jekyll and Hyde about him. When the visor goes down, then he becomes a killer, but out of the helmet, he's a very nice man. So I think a good coup for Haas as well, Esteban Ocon, and as an established Formula One driver.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's performed race winner as well, isn't he, Esteban Ocon? I think one race win, few podiums in his time. What did you make of his decision, perhaps, to go to Haas? And we know that he had conversations with Williams because of Alpine's tracker. But what have you made of that decision?
I mean, it makes sense, right? He wants to be somewhere that he's the mature driver, I think. That's kind of what that decision seemed to have been. And I mean, Alpine was a bit crazy. So it does make sense. I think it's nice. I think him and Ollie is quite a nice dynamic. And he gets to take on that mature role and I guess have a little bit more of an impact on the car development.
We talked a little bit earlier, touched on them, that it was a bit of a nightmare Grand Prix for Lance Stroll after a strong start to the season with 2 points finishes. Fernando Alonso actually finished a race, which is an improvement for him after 2 DNFs.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a great day at the office, was it, for Aston Martin this weekend?
No, they've not really been anywhere, to be honest, this weekend. It's a shame for Lance because he had 2 really good weeks. He's really quite high on the drivers' standings at the moment. Good for Alonso to get a race finish because that was ridiculous that he hadn't finished a race yet.
Yeah, I know. I read something that a lot of their focus is on their 2026 car.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, if we talk about the marketing and commercial side of things, which they're everywhere at the moment, Aston Martin, on the F175 launch, you couldn't move for Aston Martin branding at the North Greenwich station, etc. So they're plastering everywhere, but the biggest thing to attract fans is success, isn't it? So they have to be careful with 2025 performance. Did you expect this from them at the beginning of the season?
I sort of expected them to be nowhere this year, to be honest, because they've got Adrian Newey. He's going to build their 2026 car. They're just going to wait for that to happen. You know, they've just got a wind tunnel at their factory. They're really banking on next year. And ultimately,
and how do you feel about them for next year? What do you think?
If that car isn't good, I'll be surprised. Surely they've literally poached everyone they could. I mean, it will be weird if it doesn't perform, to be honest.
Yeah, heads will definitely roll, and I wonder
Yeah,
where it will start. So will it
yeah,
start with the drivers? Will it be personnel behind the scenes?
yeah,
We've seen Andy Cowell come in as the new team principal, and
yeah,
we know his record and his history. So yeah, 2026 for Aston Martin. Fingers
yeah,
crossed.
yeah. I'm sure they will. They'll be somewhere.
And Alpine, again, it's another team that seems somewhat in a bit of a limbo.
Yeah.
And the note I've got here, Maya, is does Gasly need something a la Alex Albon to gas him up, shall we say? Because at the moment, he just seems to be plodding around the circuit most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're being very harsh on Jack, but just purely because of the news that's been like around with whether his seat's safe. I think this weekend he was fine. You know, he was a bit behind Pierre, and so that's kind of what you would expect. I don't know, can Alpine afford another like big driver? I don't know.
Yeah,
But yeah,
there
no,
is that. Well, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know what kind of investment is going on with the team, with the fact that they're not producing a power unit for 2026, etc. And you mentioned Jack Doohan there, that from day dot has been under pressure.
yeah.
How much pressure for you?
I think he's probably under less pressure than it seems like from the outside. I think I mean, maybe he's going to get swapped after 6 races. Maybe that's the thing, but it doesn't feel like that's something that Alpine would do, especially if their car isn't great. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think the media is just waiting for him to mess up, and that's a shame, because he had, other than the fact that he broke his car this weekend, he had an all right
The
race.
FP2 incident was very unfortunate, wasn't
Yeah,
it? And the way in which it come about. So for
yeah.
anybody who hasn't seen or understands and knows why, just remind us, Maya, what actually happened in FP2.
Yeah, so there's a corner that you can do flat out, and so he didn't close his DRS when he needed to, and he ended up flying off into the wall. And it was a
So
really
he was
hard.
more than flat out, making no use of the aero in a high-speed corner.
Yeah, the DRS was open, and so yeah, it was not good. It's not good, and it's not good that it's come out like that he tried it on the sim and it worked, and like that's just not a good look.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a great detail, actually.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just a mistake. It was actually tactical, and he was attempting to do that.
Yeah, so they tried it on the sim and it had worked, and then obviously I think maybe his tires weren't warm enough, they were saying, and so that he couldn't execute it.
That'll be interesting then to see how that idea develops, because for me then surely they must have discussed that before he did it in the real world out on circuit, that he would have gone, shall I go for it, team? And they would have gone, yeah, right,
surely.
So what that means is, then I know we're just deliberating between ourselves, but that means it's less of his fault than if we're just watching from the outside and he forgot to press the button.
Yeah, no, and I don't see the team blaming him. That hasn't really happened. So I think, yeah, they messed up. I think everyone messed up collectively, I think, in that case. And yeah, I'm glad he's all right and he was able to race, really. But yeah, it was not a good, it looked like a really bad one.
Yeah, because there wasn't really any after comments. It made me think about when Mick Schumacher was under pressure and he had a couple of big shunts, and I was like, oh, this feels like it's going the same way. I know Jack hasn't had several, but I was like, this is like the worst thing that can happen to a team out of form, that you total the car. But from that information you're filling in, perhaps then it isn't all on Jack's back and it wasn't solely his decision. I have seen, though, of course, the pictures have started circulating again of Colapinto doing testing at Monza. So you still think there's some weight in that you mentioned a little while ago?
Yeah, I mean, they literally had Colapinto doing he was in the like pre-season like TV photo filming thing. He was the only reserve driver who was there. Like they've got everything ready for him to be swapped. It's mad. I don't think it's fair, but I can understand from a commercial perspective why you would do it. like, I get it.
Yeah, because I wonder who then has to pay for that. If they're like, "Oh, right, quick, we need some graphics of your new drive." So, i.e., did all the Red Bull boys all put the Red Bull kit on and all the V-Carb kit on and do it? Because
They
is
had
it
to go and
F1
do
that's
it.
paying for that, or would the team then have to pay for it because you've
Yeah,
swapped your driver?
I wonder. But yeah, no, they had to go to South London like during the week to do the filming again.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, they're ready for Colapinto.
Okay, well, let's see how that pans out. Next up in
Yeah.
Bahrain, of course, to see how the teams get on. But just before we conclude the show, Maia, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Let's talk quickly about Sauber, who thus far have performed above expectation, I would say, in the first 2 races of the season. But Japan didn't really work out for them from the start. Qualifying was the first Q1 session where both cars were eliminated and didn't really have much impact during the race. Is this an anomaly for you, or do you expect this is more how their season is going to go?
I think.
Be positive. Come on.
I mean, we're so hung up on what happened last season. Like, are they just going to be? I don't think they're not as miles away as they were last year. I think everything's very close. I think you've got a very close battle at the top and a very close midfield, and I think every week it's going to be different. So I think they definitely have opportunities to do cool things, to do nice things. And I think Bortoleto has a lot to give.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I know you keep your finger on the pulse on F2, just fill us in. How good did Bortoleto look last season?
He was super good. Yeah, no, he was super good. I wasn't watching him as closely as Isaac Hadjar, to be honest.
Did he outperform? Well, he did eventually, but I mean,
eventually.
As good as.
I think they were yeah, like pretty even. I wanted Hadjar to win F2. It was a sad time. It was just a sad way that he lost, right? Like, but no, I think the last race Isaac didn't manage to challenge Bortoleto because of he stalled, but Bortoleto was ahead of him in the championship anyway, so it would have been, he earned it. He definitely earned it. And I think I may be completely wrong, but yeah, he did. He won his F3. He's like an F3, F2 champ in his rookie year, so he should. Yeah, he should.
There's a driver in there then for you.
Yeah. I think he can't do anything in that seat, but hopefully he can show other teams that he's decent and he can go somewhere else, because I don't want him to hang around in that seat because he won't be able to do anything.
Hang on, they are changing to Audi next year, though, remember?
Yeah, but let's see. It's a new team. Let's see.
Let's be optimistic. Audi coming in with all that motorsport history. I'm sure they won't be languishing around at the back for too long. And yeah, a young man who's hungry and keen alongside the more experienced head of Hulkenberg.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, but I don't think it's exciting that the Audi's coming in, but I don't think there's any guarantees.
Nothing is guaranteed in life, my dear.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Well, listen, Maia, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up. Thank you so much for your time on the show this evening. And just before we end, Manon's just wanted to say that Bortoleto had a slow start to the F2 season. Don't you remember? Come on, Maia. So were you guys up against each other? Did she want Bortoleto to win and you wanted Hadjar to win?
No. We actually... we were really bitter by the end of the F2 season because our favourite actually got he started very well and then dropped off. So, but no, there was no contention at the end around. We were very just sad for Isaac because he stalled.
Well, Maia, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Manon, I can see you there in the chat box as well. She's saying very much no, she wasn't behind Bortoleto. So I apologise for that assumption. But thank you, Manon, for being involved in the chat box as well, alongside some of the regulars such as Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for supporting the show, guys. Maia, have you enjoyed your time?
Yes, it's been great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and for you guys out there. Don't forget to spread the word at Fans Forum F1. The more people we can have in here, the more dynamic we can make the conversation, of course. And I'm off to Bahrain next week, not showing off at all. So we're moving the show to the Wednesday, which is the 16th. So we're back here the evening of the 16th to review the Bahrain Grand Prix, and I'll be sure to try and get some great clips live from alongside the circuit. But to all you guys out there, thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you very soon on Fans Forum F1. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.